I don't think either party is going to be happy when the games are, the most important games, so to speak, like the playoffs. Like, he's not going to want to be a scratch for the playoffs. You're not going to want to sign a guy who or you have a good inkling that is going to be scratched in the playoffs. Like, and so with the way that they are trending as a team, with the way they're trending as an organization, we've talked about this before, the big body defenseman, they keep drafting big defensemen. It just doesn't make sense. It seems like he's a piece from a prior regime that maybe they no longer believe in structurally or organizationally. He doesn't fit their ethos anymore.
Poke the Bear is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 239, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by 98.5 The Sports Hub's Ty Anderson. Ty, how you doing?
What is going on? How are we?
Doing well, Ty. Doing well. I'm still trying to catch up on my sleep from the Celtics championship celebrations. Been going for a while. Joe Mazzulla is roaming around every filming location of the town. He's going to Boston Sand and Gravel next with the Larry O'Brien Trophy. But it's a fun time in the city, I would say. I think even though this is a primarily hockey podcast, I think we're all happy that that core of players finally gets their due, gets put up with. Again, in this city, all comes down to if you won or not. It gets you in the clear for the rest of your career. It's good to have so many players that are so key to this team finally kind of get their moment in the spotlight and get recognized for being some of the all-time greats within that franchise.
Yeah, for sure. And I will always say that summertime parades in Boston just hit different. This will now be the third one of our lifetime. They're just different. It's everyone gets to go to the city. There tends to be no school, or it's so late enough in the school year where kids can skip it. I think the Bruins one was on a Saturday, which is crazy to me that they did that.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, it got the most people there possible, but there's something about a summertime parade in Boston that is just it's more fan oriented or fan friendly than the ones you have for the Patriots. There's been 6 of those, but
Middle of January.
it's brutal. Yeah, even Red Sox ones. Like I remember the first Red Sox one in 2004. It was raining. It was spitting rain all day, and it was raw. It was cold. It was great, but man, that weather kind of stunk. So I'm sure it's going to be great on Friday. It's going to be incredible. I'm sure the numbers are going to blow our minds too. You know what I mean? Like I remember 2011, being there in the morning for the parade availability and then meeting up with my friends down the road for the parade itself. And I just remember I'm like, man, these streets are hard to navigate right now. You couldn't even walk through it. And that was 2011. I feel like we've got probably 3 times as many people who live here now since then. So it's going to be wild, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely. And now the Boston team, the longest title drought amongst the big 4, the Boston Bruins.
Yeah.
This is interesting to think about. Again, they're in the mix, like next to the Celtics, who would not surprise me if they go back-to-back next year. I'm getting ahead of myself, but that team's going to be in the mix for quite a few years now. But Bruins are probably the second closest team in terms of the odds, right? It's hockey. A lot of shit can happen. But in terms of where they are, where they should build off of next year, they're right in that mix, right?
They are. It's just to your point, though, it's like, how can you project it, right? Like, hockey is just so hard to project. There's overtimes, there's bad bounces, there's bad penalties. Like, I think it's funny that I don't think there's a sport where a bad call can torpedo you more than hockey, right? And it's never about the referees. I understand that. Like, you got to play through it. Teams get screwed all the time. But it is wild that one bad call or one bad sequence can completely shift a series. Bruins fans, if you're going to spend the summer, you watch the Panthers and the Oilers right now, and you're going to spend the summer going, man, if that call didn't get called in game 4 and they hang on, it's 2-2 going back to sunrise and you win game 5. I mean, it's wild, right? So that's why it's like, yeah, they should be next, but who knows? Who knows what can happen, right? And so this is all part of the calculus that makes this summer and the summer after that so important for the Bruins. Like, this is their chance to load up or to reset, to reshuffle, whatever you want to call it. And if you don't do it, I don't know, man. The Red Sox, as weird as it sounds, could overtake you. The Patriots could overtake you. They got a good defense. If Drake May is what they think he's going to be at number 3, you might be number 3 before you know it.
Yeah, that's true. And the Bruins, as you said, have a great opportunity to add to this team in a couple of weeks. It's funny. I think we lose track of it with like the Celtics and all that stuff, how quickly the shit's about to hit the fan with the NHL offseason. I mean, hell, you got teams making trades in the middle of the Stanley Cup playoffs now. That series going on way too long that GM's like, we can't wait anymore. So
Yeah.
we have that. We do have that coming up very quickly. But I think before, next week we'll start looking at actual free agent targets outside of, players on the Bruins own team, trade, the draft, all that kind of stuff. I think for this week, let's maybe look more internally, right? And kind of do a bit of a primer as to who the Bruins have on their roster right now. They're going to hit the market as UFAs. Maybe we'll target a few RFAs as well, but let's maybe run down the list of quite a few guys who are going to hit free agency and whether or not they're going to be back with the Bruins next year. So I broke it up in terms of by position, Ty. I feel like let's get defense first because I feel like we kind of know how those ones are going to go. Let's just get the 3D out of the way now. So leading off with Derek Forbort. And how about I'll do this. I'll say the player. You say whether or not he's back or not, and then we'll kind of go from there as to whether we agree and what kind of the future holds for that player. So, Ty, leading off, Derek Forbort. Yeah
He's
or nay, is he
gone.
back?
He's gone. He's not back. He's gone, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, for me, I think it comes down to, and I think we're going to have the same probably script for most of these pending UFA defensemen, but it just seems like where that player is in terms of his career, injuries, and where the Bruins can maybe upgrade at that spot. It just seems like it's time to move on from a player that did kind of the dirty work for a lot of these 3 years in Boston, but I think you could either upgrade to that position or even find a cheaper alternative for kind of what he brings in terms of those PK reps, block shots, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about him before in terms of like the public's perception of Derek Forbort is not shared by the Boston Bruins. For better or worse, they like him, whereas a lot of fans realize his limitations and they don't like him because of those limitations. However, I think his fate was sealed once they acquired Andrew Peak, a guy who, does the same kind of role. Yes, he plays the right side and he's a right shot versus a left shot, but same kind of guy. You rely on his blocks, you rely on what he can do in the PK, and he's also cheaper and he's signed with term. So I think once they made that move, the writing was on the wall for Forbort, both on the 23-24 season and his Boston future, personally.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Derek Forbort, great Bruin. We'll always remember Dalla, rest in peace. A great legend of Boston sports lore. But I think Derek Forbort will be playing somewhere else this upcoming season.
Yeah,
Other,
you know what's weird? Sorry, real quick. I
yeah.
saw a report today out of Minnesota that Alex Goligoski is not going to be back. He basically was like an extra D for Minnesota. He's going to retire, I think, is what they're thinking or what they're saying. Forbort's from Minnesota. I doubt that, given his injury history, he's going to earn a full-time roster spot out of the gate next season. I'd wonder if he'd go to Minnesota on a cheap contract, go home. After a trying year, obviously, between the injuries, the situation with his dog, like he went through it this year, right? And I would just wonder if Minnesota would say, you know what, we can take a cheap flyer on a guy who has been good on the PK, things of that nature. Like I'd wonder if he would go home at that point.
Yeah, that would seem to be a good fit for him. And yeah, again, a full-time, starting spot out of the gate, probably not. But still, like when he's on his game and playing those kind of minutes that no one really wants to log in terms of PK and blocking shots and all that stuff, that's where his value does kind of shine. So you do hope he lands with somewhere where even if it's maybe not cut and dry in September in the middle, the start of the year, he can eventually carve out a set spot there. So best of luck to Derek Forbort. Another defenseman hitting the market, Kevin Shattenkirk. Is he back or not?
I don't think he's back. He's what? He's like 48 games away from 1,000. I think
Yeah.
he wants to be in a place where he can hit that milestone, and I don't think it's going to be here. Again, their right side is pretty locked down. Like you
Yeah.
got your pillars there, and Shattenkirk can play on the left side, but I don't think it's where you get his best hockey consistently. So I think he's going to go somewhere where he can hit 1,000 games and maybe call it a career. But um, Shattenkirk was a guy who you look at his production. A lot of it was with David Pastrnak.
Yeah. It's
It's kind of
insane.
easy. It's easy to find
Yeah.
those kind of guys, all things considered.
Yeah, no, I agree. Solid veteran, especially for what the price tag is. Had his moments where he was able to inject a little bit more scoring punch on the blue line. Stepped up in the playoffs at times. Gave that speech that all the players credited before Game 7 against Toronto. Which is, again, when you have a veteran guy making, what do you make, like 1.05 million or something, you will gladly take any of those contributions for a guy with that signing. But as you said, right side's pretty locked down now. You don't have a vacancy there where a guy like Shattenkirk could step in. And you look at where his strengths are in terms of playmaking, power play, those kinds of things. It's what we've talked about before when we mentioned guys like Chikrin or Krug at times. With Mason Lohrei, establishing himself and hopefully growing more into that role. You don't want any player coming in here, or you're signing any player, especially that's going to take away some of those reps, even if it's on the second power play unit or what have you. So again, Shattenkirk, good veteran, but it does seem like he's a guy that you're moving on from.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these guys that we're going to talk about today, like they're veterans and they're prideful veterans, and if their opportunity here in Boston is being a scratch or being a spare part, I don't think they want to do that. And
Mhm.
I think Shattenkirk, like they're kind of getting the band back together in Tampa. It feels like,
Mhm.
and I would wonder if you go back down there for cheap money. If they have an opening for a guy who, and they, the caveat being, hey, just play me 48 games at least so I can hit 1,000. And
Yeah.
like they tend to be pretty good with that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens there, but. Yeah, like you alluded to it and you mentioned like the speeches, like the veteran leadership, like there's always a market for that, right? It's just a matter of are you trying to win a cup or do you want to hit a milestone? Right. And sometimes you can do both, but in a game that gets consistently younger and faster, that may be a little bit harder for him than it was a year ago when you noted it. He made an annoying 1.05 million. I had to look it up every time we wrote
Yep.
it. I was never certain, and it was so annoying because I was like, wait a minute, is it 1.075? What is it? It was like Nosek had an annoying number like that too. I could never remember exactly what it was.
Wasn't it like, what was no six? Was it like two? Was it two, like 2.125 or something like that?
I
Or I'm trying to
that was
remember.
I
It
think
was
that was
some,
Holla. I think that was
yeah,
Holla's
which,
number.
yeah.
I think Nosex was like 1 point. See, this is what I'm talking about. It was either like 1.75 or like 1.175. Like it was
Yeah.
something weird like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think the Bruins have to worry about that contract on their books in terms of having to sort through. I was gonna say sort of through cap friendly, but if I mention that, the Washington Capitals is gonna DMCA my. They're gonna take my VPN. They're gonna shut down my computer, all that good stuff. So RIP to cap friendly. But the last defenseman that's hitting the market, Matt Grizzlick. Is he staying or is he going?
Probably the second most polarizing player in their internal free agent class, I would say, besides one forward who we'll talk about later. Uh,
Yes.
I don't see how he's back. And I say this because it's now been two straight postseasons where they've scratched him in the playoffs. And I think that, his best utilization for the Bruins moving forward is probably as a third pairing defenseman.
Hmm.
But what comfort do you have in doing that and then knowing that he'll do that for 82 games and then they'll lose a game in the playoffs and then it's right back to the press box, right? And so I just think a clean break is probably best for both sides involved at this point. Um, and he's a guy that I think could help a team that struggles with their breakouts or struggles with getting the puck out of their own zone. If you got a defense that's a bit too big and not mobile enough, like he could help you
Hmm.
in that regard. But I just think a clean break at this point makes sense for both sides involved. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I agree. And again, I've been obviously a big fan of Grizzly and what he provides. This past year was tough for him, right? He was dealing with an injury pretty early on that hurt his numbers. Like even when he was with McAvoy, which you can talk about whether he's built for the playoffs, what have you. But when you look at how good he was with McAvoy and just the 5-on-5 buzzsaw that they were for years, like you would take that just over 82 games, and then you get to the playoffs and go from there. And I agree that he was kind of put in these bad spots where a lot of times it wasn't really even his fault of being tied. Like he's had rough playoff runs, but him getting scratched before Game 6 against the Panthers for Forbert and Clifton, who just had to both have horrific games, like turnover, 5 seconds later, pucks sailing past, all mark bad. Like
Yeah.
situations like that. Um, it just seems like it's something where if he's not going to have the trust of the coaching staff to be in those roles during those kind of years, where again he was good at 5-on-5 play during the regular season, you go into this year where his numbers decline in terms of both production and just the underlying numbers with McAvoy. If you don't have a guy that for what his past contract was, where you could plug him next to McAvoy and you don't have to touch that pairing in the regular season. Wasn't really the case this season. And again, you look at his age, he's going to be 31, not the biggest defenseman. Obviously, he's had injuries. I just don't feel like he's a guy that now seems to be a clean break. I think he can help a team. If he was to come back on a cheap deal, you'd probably take him for just what he brings in a limited role. But it just seems like how the coaching staff utilizes him, how he can probably get a solid contract or carve out a set role somewhere else. I agree. It just seems like now is the best time to move on from a guy that's been there for a sneaky long time, right? Like he's been all across the lineup, been part of some really good teams, but it does seem like just now is the time to kind of move on and see how you can kind of change that left side of your defense a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is like you know to the injuries, like it's entirely possible that there's too many now, and it's too much to overcome, and it makes sense to move on and to just kind of start new somewhere else. And you go back to the shoulder injury. He had a sports hernia injury this year. He's been through it, man. He's been through it, and I just think that again, it's time. It's time to have a break and go somewhere else because I don't think either party is going to be happy when the games are, the most important games, so to speak, like the playoffs. Like, he's not going to want to be a scratch for the playoffs. You're not going to want to sign a guy who or you have a good inkling that is going to be scratched in the playoffs. Like, and so with the way that they are trending as a team, with the way they're trending as an organization, we've talked about this before, the big body defensemen, they keep drafting big defensemen. It just doesn't make sense. It seems like he's a piece from a prior regime that maybe they no longer believe in structurally or organizationally. He doesn't fit their ethos anymore, it feels like. And I'm very happy that you mentioned that he's been around forever, because I'm doing, for the website, I'm doing like a rundown of the free agents like we are. Um, do you know how many games, or let me put it this way. Do you know where he ranks for games played among Bruins defensemen all time? Blew my mind. This blew my mind, I'm not going to lie.
Is he like 14 or something like that, or is it
He's
like is he top 20?
24. He's
That's pretty
24.
impressive. Yeah,
100-year history of a team. He's top
yeah,
25. Like, that's
not bad.
wild to me.
From a kid from Charlestown, it's pretty cool. So
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. It sucks that it didn't end, the way that all hometown kids wanted to. But I also don't think that he should be looked at, as like a failure. Like, no, you carved out a 500 plus game career or whatever it is, for like, I think it's 400, 500. Like, you carve out that kind of career here, as a 5'9" defenseman drafted in what, the third round, fourth round. Like,
mhm.
that's a success, man. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. So wherever Grizzly ends up next, again, we wish him well, along with all the other guys we're going to talk about who may not be back in a black and gold sweater. Ty, we're going to move on to look at other areas of the roster. But before we do that, take a quick break here from our good friends over at Prize Picks. The NBA Finals are over and the Celtics are champions, but there's still so many ways for you to get in on the action and win up to 100 times your cash on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level on the court, baseball diamond, and much more. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 players' stats projections, and you're locked in. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a huge selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. With the finals over, the hoop action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is still heating up. With stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Brianna Stewart and Aja Wilson, you could win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. There's no shortage of ways to participate in PrizePicks. This week, I'm selecting Caitlin Clark for more than 25 points and Tanner Houck for more than 7 strikeouts. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now, let's get back to the show. Shout out once again to our good friends over at PrizePicks. All right, Ty. We obviously have quite a few forwards. Before we go to that, and that'll take up the chunk of this podcast, in terms of just the goalies, RFAs, Jeremy Swayman, we expect a contract. Do you have any changes in terms of what you think that contract's going to end up being? I think it's all obvious he's going to sign, but what's your prediction as to what that deal is going to end up being?
All right. I'm going to say 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say 7.75 per.
Ooh.
That's what I'm going to say. Like, I think that if I'm his camp, I'm angling for like 8.5.
Yeah.
But I do think that they've been pretty good about getting guys to take just under market value, and they're going to say, hey, we have an internal structure here. We got to try to get a center, or you're going to be backstopping some pretty bad teams. And so I think that's kind of where they're going to land. I might be completely wrong on this, but I just feel like they're going to get it just under 8 per season, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I have 8 by 8, 64 million. I agree that if you're able to get anything under 8, I think if you're a Bruins fan, you are very happy. Because again, you look at just how much the cap's jumping up, not just this year, but I think the next 2 or 3 years, there should be a pretty sizable jump. At least that's the projections every year that we could be looking at this, cap ceiling in 2026, 27. You could be getting close to 100 million, right? Where all of a sudden, if you have a guy like Swayman for under 8, and you've got upcoming contracts for guys like Ottinger, right, and Demko, and some of these other goalies that Shesterkin, right? If all of a sudden the next kind of threshold are these goalies where the market value is 8.75, 9 million, 10 million, and that's the benchmark for players. It's kind of like how you have Pasternak now making 11, or you have McAvoy making 9.5 when another 2-3 years, an established #1 defenseman is probably the benchmark is 11, right? The established franchise winger who can score 50 goals is getting 13 million a year, right? Like those contracts are going to continue to look better and better over time. So if you're the Bruins, you're able to get Swayman for under 8 million. You look at, I think what Sorokin has his contract signed for 8.25, but he's got a Vezina finalist nod under his belt, I guess. So that kind of helps him out. But if you're the Bruins and you get him to 8 or under, I think you take that and you are more than happy with kind of getting a pay bump, secured for him, but also something that over the next even year or two could look pretty good, especially when all these other goalies end up signing their new deals.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that, and I apologize if we've talked about this before, but, one thing you have to consider with Jeremy Swayman, and one thing his camp is going to probably be considering here, is that he is setting the market for the guys, like the next wave. Like you have Jake Ottinger in need of a new contract soon. Igor Shesterkin needs a new contract next year. I want to say there are some other guys involved in that grouping. I think Saros is 2 years away, and he's a little bit older, I know, but again, one of the best goalies in the league. So I think that when you look at Swayman, he is kind of setting that market for that, that next wave of the young elite goaltenders. And so I wonder if his camp is putting that in their mind, saying, "Well, yeah, we can sign for a little bit less, but if Igor is making 10 million a year from now, and Ottinger's making 9.25, do we look stupid?" And so I think there's that part of it. I don't think that's going to be a determining factor for Swayman. He likes it here. He wants to be here. He wants to be the number one guy here, and so it's going to cost them. But I just wonder. I wonder, where do they meet in the middle ground between Swayman, his agent, and Don Sweeney? Like what you know baseline do they get to and say, okay, we'll concede here and here because we know this makes the most sense? Like, they're going to have to do some haggling, but it's got to get done soon, man. You got to know how much money you have, right, to play with. So I hope it gets done soon, but I just wonder if they got to make the other move with the other goalie before they can actually put that pen to paper there.
Yeah, you don't want to hit the point where all of a sudden you're thinking you're going to sign Tyler Toffoli or someone, and all of a sudden you realize you're 0.75 million. That damn Shattenkirk contract, that
Yeah.
damn 0.05 million screws you over. So no, you do have to know, for a guy who's probably going to be, I'd imagine, your top signing in terms of just annual payout. You have to figure out how much money you're actually going to be working with. And again, that also, again, as you said, coincides with Olmark in terms of, are you going to have another 5 million off the books? Are you using that to acquire someone else, and that takes up some of your cap space? So a lot of moving parts there, but you do hope the Bruins do sign Swayman pretty soon to what we expect and hope is a long-term deal worth a pretty sizable pay bump considering the year he had. Ty, let's move on to the final part here. The forwards, and might as well start off with the one that has brought out the most discourse, the most divisive player, I would probably say, on the Bruins. Jake DeBrusk had a great playoff run. Didn't have a great regular season, all things considered. Kind of polarizing to see where exactly his market is or what kind of player the Bruins have in a player like Jake DeBrusk. But what's your take? Is he here or is he signing elsewhere on July 1st?
I think he's signing elsewhere, and you know, to your point earlier, talking about guys getting paid more in the not too distant future, it went up to it increased to what, 88 million for this
Yeah,
upcoming year. They're hoping next year it's gonna be 92 or 93 million. And so we're looking at a cap rise that by the third or fourth year of Jake DeBrusk's next contract, he might be making what your third liners make. And so
right.
that's the part that's tough to project here. But I do think he's gone. I think that the Bruins have a history here of when it plays out this long, they've made their decision, and it tends to be we're walking away. I think the tea leaves have been there, and I thought that the language of Don Sweeney's breakup day availability told you where they were leaning. He said we were aggressive. We were aggressive in our pitch. So it's like, okay, so they're not anymore, or something happened and now it's see you later. So I think he's gone. I think he's going to Western Canada. I don't know where exactly, but I think he's going out there. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. It was one where you mapped it out right, and you hoped. I think he's a really good player that fits a lot of needs for this team. And you listen to what Cam Neely says about how this team needs speed. You got a guy right there in Jake DeBrusk who has that skating ability, who performs in the playoffs, wins puck battles, can do a little bit of everything. Developed into a really, really good two-way player where you don't really, even when he's not producing, and I know that's why he gets paid those big bucks, but he's a guy you don't really have to worry about. He's not going to hurt you defensively. He's not going to do those kinds of things. So he's a really good player. But then you hear, as you said, Don Sweeney mention all this stuff during breakup day. It does feel like, hey, we made you our best offer. We want you here. You're not going to take that deal? Shit, man. Good luck. All
Yeah.
right. Like, what do you want us to do? Right. Like, and again, it's unfortunate because, not to say that, like, oh, like I wouldn't take, Reinhardt or anyone else like that, like, obviously, but like in terms of where the Bruins are going to have in terms of if you're allocating money towards Swayman and, an Elias Lindholm or someone else like that, and you're not going to most likely be in the running for a big fish top six winger like a Reinhardt or a Gensel, obviously, a guy like DeBrusk makes a lot of sense as being that really versatile top six winger that can still, do a lot for your team. If he's not going to be in the mix, you have to now, find, are you replacing him in the aggregate? Are you looking for, all right, we're going to get, a guy who's off and on like a Bertuzzi, but his defensive game isn't up to par? Is it you get a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who's probably a steady goal scorer, can give you 20, 25 goals? Are you looking at more of a value add with a guy who's, a quick skater like Anthony Duclair, right? Like, there's a lot of ways you can kind of spin it in terms of how they can replicate his production, but in terms of his overall, the package that he provides, he does kind of check a lot of boxes to what this team needs. So I could see why the Bruins are like, all right, the money's not going to work. We gave you our best shot. We're not going to keep on haggling with you. We're not going to keep on getting to a bidding war. We have so much other shit to take care of. But it is unfortunate that you look at what the Bruins need, and now he would, make life a lot easier if they were able to come to terms on some long-term deal for 6.5 or something like that. I see him not signing that here in Boston now at this point, barring something crazy happening.
Right, right. And there were times where you thought, like, I'm trying to remember a guy whose negotiations went this long and he signed.
And signed, yeah.
Like, I think Taylor Hall is the closest thing, but even that wasn't like there was no doubt. There was like, no, we're gonna find a landing spot. We just haven't done it yet. I don't think there's a case that compares to that in recent memory. Like Pastrnak was signed at the trade deadline,
Yeah.
months before he was going to hit free agency. So, that's telling in that regard. And I wonder, again, this might be more sports radio bullshit clanging around in my brain. I wonder if his open sort of, I want to get signed during the season was because he rejected an offer that was pretty decent, in September or whatever, and then had the miserable year he had scoring wise for a while and was like, shit, I want to get signed, man. I want to sign. And I wonder if that point the Bruins were like, nope, that deal is off the table now, which is kind of similar to something that happened with Torrey Krug, where
Right.
they had an early season offer. The Krug's camp said, no, we're going to wait and see. And then that offer was subsequently pulled. And so I wonder if something like that kind of happened. And that's why Jake got so open and was very transparent about the anxiety of not having a contract and what it does to him. I just wonder if that was almost like a play on his part. Like, no, let's just go back to that first offer. I don't care. But again, that might be just sports radio bullshit I'm inventing in my brain, which I'm one to do, on occasion sometimes. So yeah.
I mean, listen, that it makes perfect sense in terms of where Sweeney has mentioned they've had offers out there for him. Like, and if he's not gonna bite on a deal, and like I could see the Bruins after that 2022-23 season where if he doesn't break his leg in the Winter Classic, he probably has 35, 36 goals. Like he was fantastic that year. I could see the Bruins wanting to make a concerted effort to sign him there. They already stuck with him through the Cassidy stuff, the trade requests. They signed, you thought he was going to get traded at the deadline a few years ago, and they signed him to a bridge extension instead. Like, the Bruins have made a concerted effort of investing in this player that they drafted, keeping him here long term. Like, I don't think this was a case where it's like free agency. All right, good luck, man. See you later. Like,
Yeah.
there's clearly like they wanted to retain him. So how that broke down, how it kind of fell to the wayside, and again, like, didn't have a good regular season, but performed well in the playoffs. Maybe that changed the approach. Maybe the Bruins circled back at the end of the year. Again, we're just kind of going through potential scenarios here, but I could see the Bruins checking back in at the end of the year, being like, hey, strong end to the year. Like, we want to keep you here. And he's like, yeah, do you see the playoff I had? How about 7? Like, all right, man. Like, whatever.
Right.
Let's call Toffoli's
Yeah.
agent. Fuck it. Like, that could also just be the case where it does seem like this isn't like, all right, like, Godspeed, Jake. Like, best of luck to you. Like, we've only invested in your career for, almost a decade now. We've kind of stuck with you. Like, this is not a player that at that age, what he provides, how good he is, as a two-way player now, that you just let him walk. Like, I think something must have just fallen to the wayside over the last couple of months or earlier this year that just seems like that it's time just to move on. Like, I just don't think the Bruins are wanting to engage in a prolonged bidding war when, again, there's so many other things going on. It's the same thing with like Bertuzzi last year. Like, would the Bruins like to keep Bertuzzi? Yeah. If they realized his market was going to dry up, maybe they would have stuck around, but they didn't have that luxury. You have only so much cap space. You had so many bargain contracts that are getting signed early on. You couldn't wait a few of the Bruins in that regard. The Bruins can't wait until July 3rd or 4th for DeBrusk to make his decision when there's so many other guys that are going to get signed 30 minutes into the start of free agency on July 1st.
Absolutely, and that's the part that is going to be really telling for Don Sweeney in terms of where he's at as a veteran GM. Been on the job now for 9 years, right? I got to be one of the longest tenured GMs currently active in the league, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Does he show some patience, some restraint when names and guys start flying off the board, or do they strike first? Like sometimes there will be a guy, there will be a talented player who is unsigned by July, let's say July 3rd, July 3rd, July 4th. There will be a guy still looking for work who's a good player. It happens every year. Can the Bruins be that team that strikes, or do they blow all their money right off the bat? And I go back to 2021. Remember how excited we were in 2021? They had like 30 million in cap space. We're like, oh my God, they got 30 million. This is great. And they got role players. They got role players and Linus Ullmark. And you were like, all right, I guess that's fine. Yeah. And so I just, if I'm the Bruins, I would love it if they could exude a bit of patience. Don't race to sign Eric Holla and Tomas Nosek, as good as they were for your team, and Nick Foligno. Like have a little bit of patience, but at the same time, does the market allow them to do that? That's the other part of the equation. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see if it's going to be July 1st. It's going to be like whatever it is new when it starts, and it's 12:01. It's like they're going to sign Brendan Duhaime. I'm like, okay, yeah, like he hits a lot of guys, but oh shit. All right, guys.
We'll see. I thought you were gonna say that's gonna be 11:59 a.m. and Twitter's gonna be like, "Why haven't they signed anybody?" Like it's gonna just be like
that will happen. That will happen as well. Didn't Twitter break?
I'll be doing it too.
Didn't Twitter break or like it was super slow one day during free agency? It was some big NHL day where like I think most of Twitter didn't care because it was like a big NHL day. Maybe it was the deadline.
That sounds right.
It was down or something like that. That dipshit will probably like put his grilled cheese on like the hard drive and fry the servers or some stupid shit.
Concerning
shit like that. But yeah, exactly. Looking into this. It's just mozzarella just in the CD-ROM case.
It's that YouTube video where it's like there's beans in the hard drive.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. Hopefully he doesn't put any grilled cheeses in I was say on the radiator. It's a Phil Leotardo line, but But, Ty, before we further delve into the rest of the forwards that are hitting the open market on the Bruins, take another quick break here from our good friends over at Game Time Tickets.
Quick break to tell you about my good friends over at Game Time. I am very excited about the NBA playoffs, and what's awesome is here in Boston, Celtics fans make TD Garden the best atmosphere for a playoff game. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Maybe it's the NBA playoffs, or it's the MLB regular season. Once the Celtics wrap up, which hopefully ends with a championship, Fenway Park is a great place to spend a summer day or night. Going from TD Garden playoffs to chill, exciting nights at Fenway Park is one of the best times of the year. With Game Time, there's last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and there's flash deals. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And there are zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. So, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show.
Shout out once again to Game Time Tickets. All right, Ty, let's run through these last couple of potential or pending free agents. Up front, Danton Heinen. Is he staying or is he going?
I think he's going. I feel like he might have priced himself out. Like, he
Mhm.
had a really good year. He's a guy that I'd love to keep around for less than 2 million. I don't think he's going to be making that though. I think he might make 2.5 or 3. So if the price is right, I bring him back. But I just don't know if they can get that right price because going back to the DeBrusk comments, like a discussion rather, you know, I thought that you don't sign him. You got to sign two guys that make the same amount of money, right? One to address the PK, another one to address sort of the net front power play, top six maneuverability. But I just don't know if they, again, similar to what we're talking about with like not blowing your money on role players. I just wonder if the price point is a bit too high for him at this point. I'd love him back. I just don't know. Like, this market might get him paid a little bit better than maybe we think.
Yeah, exactly. I think he obviously deserves a pay raise from what he was making. He making peanuts this past year, but like again, if you sign him for 1.5 million, that'd be great. But he's worth more than that, right? Like I feel like he's gonna get 2.5, 2.75, 3 somewhere from some team. And again, like ideally, you'd like to keep him because he's so good that he can play in the top six on the spot role. He can be a great, third line guy, a fourth line guy, ideally. But I think you look at where the Bruins have to allocate the money that they have, and you look at like that bottom six right now, where you do have, the Brezos, the Beechers, the Laukos, the Geekies, the Fredericks. Is Coyle in that mix this upcoming year? If they get another center, you got Patra. It does seem like they do have options in the bottom six where it's like there's not as much of a major need there. Again, you'd love to have Heinen. Like he does so many things well, but not at 2.5, 3 million, right? I feel like he could be, and I'd rather him go to a place where he's maybe a featured staple to the second or third line, making 3 million off the year he had. Like, dude had a rough offseason and made the most of it. All the credit to him, but I think he can go somewhere where he can actually carve out a pretty solid role and get paid accordingly for the year he had.
Yeah, that's where I land with it. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense for the Bruins to allocate him a bunch of money like that, and I also don't know if there's a scenario in which they do that and they don't have buyer's remorse when he's inevitably playing on the third or fourth line because he hasn't scored in 9 or 10 games because that's who he is. And so I think that is sort of like I'm down to run it back with him. It's just the price has to make sense. And as we get closer and closer to July 1, I know David Pagnotta from the fourth period had that report. I want to say a week and a half ago now that they were going to sit down and talk, and nothing has really come out of that. That tells me that the price point between the sides just is the bridge a little bit too vast there. So I don't see them coming to terms before July 1, and maybe they circle back on. Maybe he's the guy that we're talking about on July 5th, who's looking for work
Right.
still. Maybe that's how
Right.
they sign him.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's definitely someone worth keeping tabs on. A useful player. They'd love to have him, but again, just depends on what the overall contract is going to be. So we'll see how that plays out there. Another guy hitting the market, James Van Riemsdyk, veteran player, performed pretty well before he kind of ran out of gas a little bit there. Dealt with an illness that had him drop a whole bunch of weight at the worst possible time for the playoffs. Where do you see him? Is he staying or is he going?
I think he's going, but I'm not a hard out on him. And I only say that because if you lose to Brusk, you're going to need that net front guy, right? And before he, got an alien inside of his body, James Van Riemsdyk was on pace for 20 goals, right? And he
Yeah,
was
that
one of your better
xenomorph.
players.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that xenomorph virus.
Yeah. Yeah. The one from Spaceballs that pops out and starts, "Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling."
Yes.
Um, it was a rough ending to the year for him. But if you look at how he was at the bye week, you felt pretty good about that signing. So I'm not a hard out. Again, it's the money has to make sense, but what's his market like? Where could he go? And if you're going to lose Heinen, who can play the left and the right side, and if you're going to lose DeBrusk, who can play the left and the right side, but also plays on the power play net front, like JVR, a guy who can play left and right wing, who's a net front guy, it makes sense to keep him around. It's just a matter of, can he make even less money? Could you give him, he's 35. Could you give him that kind of contract where, hey, we're going to pay you a base of 800,000 and then we're going to we'll give you another, we'll give you $1 million in bonuses if you can hit 20 goals. Like, gives him something to work for, right? And it can be a pay raise, but if it's not, you feel better about it. And so my only concern though, he's slow. And
Yeah.
like he's slow and watching this Florida and Edmonton series, the game is so fast. What the game the pace at which the Bruins play feels almost alien, compared to
Mhm.
how the rest of the league has been moving speed wise. So like most guys, I'd bring him back, but it's a caveat, and it's got to be on your terms and affordable. So right now, I'm gonna say he's gone.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think it just comes down to the overall fit. You look at, again, perfect world. You'd love to have him as a veteran pickup with not making a lot of money because, again, you put a guy with that net front capabilities in a spot to succeed, he'll probably produce, right? You can still get 15-ish goals, 30 points for a guy who's not making a whole lot of money. Just depends on how the Bruins are going to allocate the rest of that money and whether it's just more of a identity shift that kind of augments how the Bruins change things. Like when Neely came out was, instead of every year, it's usually been got to get to the hard ice, got to get bigger. Him like saying like speed is the big thing, like is a bit of a change from how they've approached things. So if that's going to be their all in approach, it does seem like it's not just the players themselves, but the identity of the team that they're trying to augment a little bit. And you look at how Florida skates, you can kind of see why. So I think I agree. Like ideally, not ideally, but a guy that you could have back for the right price, but just doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense right now. So I agree. I think he's another guy that, again, going through this list, a lot of these guys are not going to be back, but I think we kind of more or less saw that coming. But um, I guess wrapping this one up in terms of another free agent, Pat Maroon, yay or nay? You want him back or not?
I want him back. I do, and I think that if you're gonna reintroduce Matthew Poitras to this lineup next year, I would like a guy that if you even touch him, he's coming at you. And I do believe that there's something to be said for Pat Maroon's influence in his locker room intangibles. I think that he's a cage rattler, right? And I think at times this Bruins team, this organization, they need a guy who's going to walk in and say, "Hey, no, this is bullshit. Like, wake up." Like, you know what I'm saying? And I think that guys like Pat Maroon, him being that guy, it carries weight. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup winner. He's been through every scenario humanly imaginable at this point in his career. And so I would like him back. And I think he does fit the model of their fourth line of having a big body who can win pucks along the walls along with two speedsters. If your fourth line is a combination of Beecher, Lauko, or Boquist and Pat Maroon, like that checks that box. And so I don't think that the Bruins got the best version of him at the same
Mhm.
time with the back injury. So I just think it makes sense to bring him back. Like I would do it because I think it's gonna be low money. He made 800
Yeah,
thousand a year ago. Like
yeah,
he loves it here. Talking to him, he was very he loved being a Bruin, and he didn't feel like he got the full experience of being a Bruin. He didn't get into a fight in his time here, like, and that seems so silly to say, like that's what he cares about. Like, no, but like you're gonna need that kind of guy at some point over an 82 game season. You just need those kind of guys, and so I'd keep him around personally. I think for the low money factor and the leadership intangibles, all that.
yeah. No, I agree. And again, like we just went through talking about uh, James Van Riemsdyk and how he's not very fast. Pat Maroon is also not very fast, but when you look at the money and what he brings outside of it, if he's not going to be playing 80 games a year, but he can chip in when needed, add the physicality. I think just the value outside of the off the ice is, as you said, a cage rattler, right? Like a guy that, people are talking about Maroon in the playoffs. Like, why isn't he fighting Bennett? And him to be like, hey, idiots, everyone get your fucking shit together. Like, he's not going to fight me. Like,
Right.
which, like, you kind of need some of these guys to either, be candid with us, use us to kind of send those messages out or anything like that, and just being like, listen, we know how the fucking game is played. This is the
Yeah.
rule. This is what's going on. Like, I think you see why he's like, a guy like that who's really frank and kind of control the room and has that winning kind of pedigree has value, especially on a team that, it's still anchored by guys who've been there a while, but I think having an outside presence who's fought through many playoff runs, has the respect of the team, And when you've got so many other young guys that are, on this team that are carving out roles, whether it's Patra or Beecher or Lorai or some of these other players, having someone else outside of the organization that's not just Marchand, right? Or Pasternak or Carlo or someone else like that. I think there's value to be had there, and especially if he's signing for 800,000 or what have you. I think there's a lot to like there. Again, we'll see how his back is, because that's kind of the first thing Sweeney mentioned, where I'm like, we said they have to check how his health is. So I'm like, did they not like what the Wild wrote on his medical report before they got him? Right? Because, this is a guy that, as much as you kind of view his career and where he is now is like, is he just like a physical winger? He was like on pace for like 35 points, I think, last year for the Wild before he got hurt. Like, not to say that he can be that, but like, he's not a guy that if he plays 80 games, he's going to have 3 goals and 4 assists, and that's kind of not his real value. Is he going to be a 30-point guy? No, but he can give you 15, 20 points if he's healthy and engaged and winning puck battles and doing those little things that may not look like much, but they can lead to a secondary assist or a greasy goal or something like that. So I do think he has value. And yes, for I think what the price is, especially, if there's ever a guy that you want to sign that goes against Neely's, new approach in terms of speed, it's the 3-time Stanley Cup winner who can beat the shit out of guys, commands the room, and just adds a different element, both on and especially off the ice. So I think the Bruins would like to have him back, and I think it'd make a lot of sense considering just what the price tag is going to be.
Yeah, and that's sort of the name of the game here. But as you can tell between us, going through every guy, it's like the money has to make sense. So if the money's going to make sense, and you're somewhat of a depressed asset in terms of your market or your age, whatever the case may be, like I think your odds of coming back are greater. And so that's why, I'm out on guys like Heinen and DeBrusk, not because I don't like them as players. I think they have a tremendous value as players, but you don't want to get bogged down paying premiums or what you may view as premiums when you have so many glaring needs elsewhere. Left shot D, a high end center, a scoring wing somewhere in your top 6. I don't care if it's left side or right side. You need another one. Like, you can't kind of pay for guys that may be at their very best on the third line while also paying them substantial money. So like veteran guys like Maroon, like JVR, like they just feel like they're more fits for what they want because they're going to be cheap, right? Like the Bruins are in that era of we got to get veteran talent that's cheap but still effective. Tampa was great at this. Pittsburgh was great at this. Like you got to bring in those kind of guys. And so if you're older and you have some intangibles and you can be had for $1 million or less, I like your odds of coming back greater than a Heinen or a DeBrusk, it feels like.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Yeah. And it's something where, again, we do look at, does seem like a lot of these players are going to be playing elsewhere, but it's all about finding where the money works. Who's one or two guys that are worth investing in. And again, ideally like to have a guy like DeBrusk. It just doesn't seem feasible. So the onus now falls on Don Sweeney and the Bruins to find other players to kind of either replicate that production, change the identity of what they're looking for. And we'll see how that kind of all plays out in the weeks ahead. But
well,
yes.
Real quick,
Yeah.
So like when you have Pastrnak making 11.5, right? That's what it is, or is it?
Mm-hmm.
So you have Pastrnak making 11.5. You have McAvoy making 9.5. You're gonna have Swayman making probably 8. Somewhere thereabouts. Like every time you sign a guy to one of those kind of contracts, it stresses the need to hit a home run with your $800,000 signing or your 900, your 1 million, like that kind of threshold right there, right? And Elias Lindholm in Vancouver, we think, rejected a contract for what, $7 million per year, I think was the reporting.
I think so. Yeah.
So let's assume he's going to get 8. Let's say the Bruins are that team that gives him 8. Now you have to find even more of those guys who make league minimum or up to $1 million, and they got to be home runs. And so that's the part that the Bruins kind of have to nail. And we'll see if they can do that internally or externally. But I think that's going to be the name of the game. Like when they have these high-end sort of openings, like you're bottom of the roster, you got to have the young players or the cheap veterans that are giving you value on value on value, which you got a year ago. Now you got to see if you can either keep those guys or bring in new guys who can do the same thing. That's a difficult game. It really is.
Yeah, will be fascinating to see how it all does kind of play out. It's not going to be easy. Again, you look at how much cap space the Bruins have, but it's not an easy game in terms of picking the right players, balancing the books, and also leaving some room maybe for the upcoming years as well to build to this team. It's not really as fun as it is to now look at it. You look at like the actual work that needs to be done from the Bruins. It's tough to find the right guys and where they do fit.
And
So
it's also like that money can dry up quick. Like I
very
think
quickly.
I think people kind of gotta temper it a little bit. If you make one big signing, well, there goes half of that almost. Like that's it's not a ton of money. Like it's enough to make a good move here or there, but you're not getting 3 superstars for this cap space. Like you're just not doing it.
It's one of those ones where even if let's say they free up Mark's contract and they have 26 million or what have you, and you have like Bruins cap space who's always on top of things, like has the new updated number and it's like 26.2 or something. They signed Allmark Swayman to an $8 million a year deal. It does feel like different when all of a sudden it bumps down to 18 million. You're like,
Yeah.
oh shit.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it does dry up quick. Oh, you got Elias Lindholm. Oh, you're down to 9 million in cap space.
Yeah.
11 million in cap space. Like, okay.
And then you break it down by opening. You're like, oh, you can spend $2.5 million per opening. Oh, well, that's not great. Like it can happen quick, man.
Yeah. So we will see how it all plays out. Ty, this was fun. We'll talk more about free agents and targets and all that stuff next week that are outside of the Bruins organization. But as we kind of get ready for what should actually be some thankfully tangible news in the next couple of weeks, where can we find all your stuff related to the Boston Bruins?
You can find me on 985sportshub.com. You can also find me on X @_Ty Anderson. And how about you?
Yes, you can find me over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. We'll have you covered every step of the way there this offseason. You can also follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it is, at Conor Ryan _93. So this was episode 239 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan.
That's a lot of episodes.
A lot of episodes. So let's keep it going. Wait till the episode 500 extravaganza. We have you and Evan on at the same time.
Hell
be a
yeah.
blast.
Hell yeah.
We talk about that'll be like episode 500. So that'll be like we're 1 year into the Leon Draisaitl era.
Hell
and
yeah.
he's like he only has 91 points, and we'll say he's a bust or something. Like no, we getting too far ahead of ourselves. But anyway, this is episode 239 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. You fans have a great rest of your week.